Today I want to continue the conversation of handlers and healing and talk about why so many of us don't remember our childhoods. I always had black spots in my memory for most of my adult life when I would think back to my childhood. And I guess that I was so focused on the now that I always just thought that it was kind of normal. And in some way, I think it is normal for us not to remember everything, because you've got to remember that our brains are not too different from a computer. There's only so much memory storage we have, and the older we get, the more time we're here, the more memories we have to store. So I think part of it could be that we don't remember because it just wasn't that impactful. So that's why we don't remember specific things. Other things, I have done some deeper dives on this if you want to explore this more. So check out my Monarch programming playlist if you want to explore this topic in depth. But just to touch on one of the topics that I talk about in that video, I think one of the reasons we don't remember is also because when memories are recorded, when we're in specific states of consciousness, depending on how traumatic they might be, there is a part of us that might just remember the feeling of that memory, but not the actual memory. Now, I'm a person that does research all the time, is always learning, so I don't remember specifically why, how your memory works, but I know I've talked about it in other videos, definitely when it comes to Monarch programming and the handlers topics. But the gist of what I'm trying to say as far as why we don't remember is because we were likely in a state of trauma when it happened. So you can also think of this memory loss as a form of protection, especially when you're a child and you're so sensitive. We are just not primed for a lot of adult topics. And then you could even argue and say, well, we also live in a society that seems to have a specific agenda they're trying to push as far as programming goes. A lot of, just get on Netflix and a lot of the streaming services and you'll see every friggin' other movie is murder, mystery, crime, thriller, horror. And the horror movies seem to be getting gorier and gorier. So when it comes to trauma, when we relive traumatic moments, our body relives it too. And I'll get into that here more in a second, how trauma can get trapped in the body. But essentially, what I wanted to touch upon real quick and finish this thought is that when we're in altered states of consciousness or something really traumatic happens, we don't always store it as a long-term memory. And one of the ways we might be able to know if we've had something traumatic happen to us, but we can't put our finger on it, sometimes we can tell just by how we interact in our relationships as an adult. So for example, what's my attachment style? I think attachment styles are something really worth looking into. They helped me a lot in my healing journey when I was first getting started with all of this. And there's 3 types, basically a secure attachment style, and it all, according to psychology, kind of goes back to our childhood and our childhood caretakers, or if you've been on my channel learning about Monarch programming with me, you might also call these childhood handlers. So I've also done another video about Monarch programming and handlers specifically, and that goes into secret societies and some of the conditioning that happens on a mass scale, alleged conditioning, according to a piece of literature, this book that I read, The Illuminati Formula, used to create an undetectable total mind-controlled slave by Cisco Wheeler and Fritz Springmeier. So it's important to also make a disclaimer here and say that that was a book. It came out in the 90s. Things very much have changed since then. We still don't know their intentions upon writing it. Are they a plant? Was it a guy genuinely trying to help people who have suffered from trauma-based mind control? I don't know. Was he doing the thing that the elite do where they have to tell us what they're doing it so we consent in some way, shape, or form? I don't know. Maybe in this case, the why isn't so important as the what are we going to do about it now. But as I was saying, I'm going to forget what I'm saying because I get so ADHD sometimes and off tangent. But I think I was talking about how hospitals, like I was talking about attachment styles and how early childhood caretakers or even hospital handlers, like if we've spent a lot of time in the NICU or we're sick as an infant and spent a lot of time in the hospital, our attachment style is often created, or I think it is created then. But I think what I'm realizing that this stuff goes way beyond your Monarch programming, MK Ultra lore. I'm just calling it lore because, again, I just don't want everyone thinking that they have a handler and that there's paranoia and the government's after them. But I do want to say, like, I want to validate your experience if that has been your experience, because I think a lot of people have not been taken seriously, and it is really sad to me to see people suffer and being gaslit when this stuff is clearly like something is going on. And the other thing I want to say is, after reading this book and just like observing the human behavior in my own life, I've seen that a lot of these tactics, these programming tactics, seem to be used on us at large. So for the most part, like pretty much all of us are born in hospitals. And for the most part, pretty much all of us are separated from our mothers at some point. And I just found it interesting that in Monarch programming, that book that I read and mentioned, splitting happens within the first 18 months and trauma starts at the second, sometimes when you're in the womb with the medication that they give the parents. So if you think about how we come into this world, often in a sterile environment, we're being handed off to another handler, not our parents often, or we may, be held by our parents for a moment, but then it's like, okay, let's get to business. Let's prick the heel. Let's give you shots. Let's clean you off. So you've got all these other people handling you, which is kind of a traumatic way to come into the world. But my question is that by design? Because it splits the personality so that it can be programmed with alters or alternate personalities. Now, I do have to also mention that the book I refer to all the time is mostly talking about DID, dissociative identity disorder, or multiple personality disorder, which is an extreme version of this kind of programming. But that's not to say that splitting doesn't happen to the everyday person too, because it does, and they talk about splitting in psychology. Splitting can often be something, maybe you've heard it in the context of relationships, how one moment you can go to completely idealizing someone, they can do no wrong, which often happens in the honeymoon phase of a relationship. And then immediately after, they do one thing that reminds you of something traumatic, so it's a trigger for you. And all of a sudden, your mind splits. And now that loving person who could do no wrong before, all of a sudden is a handler, somebody out to get you, somebody here to hurt you, a liar. Oh, I always had a red flag about them or a bad feeling about them in my gut. So you go from, again, idolizing someone and thinking nothing but good things about them to all of a sudden splitting how you see them. And this is also common in mental disorders like bipolar, and I think it's more common for borderline personality disorder, where splitting occurs a lot in the close relationships. And I think that's often because my own personal theory about borderline and bipolar, which I've done also some videos on that are on probably the Gifted Kids and Empaths playlist. But I believe that a lot of people who have these disorders, they are called disorders, but what's really happening on a spiritual level is that these people we're just maladapted to earth living. I think there's a part of people who have these disorders that are more sensitive, aka they might have more psychic abilities, but because we're not taught how to get a rein on those psychic abilities, and we're really not taught how to Like, we're not taught that we're spiritual beings. We're pretty much thrown into the system the second we're born. So hospital, education system, go get a job, school system, marriage, matrimony, that's a system, children and retirement, and that seems to be the life path for a lot of people, or at least the life path that they want for us. So everything's very by the book, linear, and kind of clinical and cold. But if you're a person who is here and you're sensitive, you're creative, it can be hard to fit yourself in the box that is this world that we live in. So I do think a lot of people with those disorders naturally see things different. They think about the world differently. And I do think on some level, it's kind of a form of brainwashing to continuously, not address the underlying trauma or look at the structures on the whole that create this kind of splitting in the individual, and then instead blame it on the individual, saying that there's something wrong with them, they're maladjusted, they need medication or talk therapy for the rest of their life. And I'm not saying those things don't work and that everybody shouldn't have talk therapy. And I'm not saying that medication can't be helpful or that you should stop taking it. So do not take my words wrong. I'm just saying that stuff by itself, without understanding the underlying trauma or the systems at play here that create that kind of trauma and splitting, oftentimes for a lot of people, that is not enough. And I was one of those people. I was not enough to just go to a therapist, to just take medication, because what the medication did for me, it numbs me out, and I never got to the root of why I was the way I was, and I never got to the root of how to change these behaviors. So back to splitting and attachment style. Splitting, I believe, is something that happens to every one of us. And attachment style is based on what our handlers were doing. So most of us, well, I don't even know. I haven't met a lot of secure attachment style people, but that's probably because I wasn't a secure attachment style for much of my life. So like attracts like. If you're not a secure attachment style, you're probably going to not attract secure attachment style people, because we're going to continue to meet teachers that reflect who we are back to us until we heal those core wounds. So secure attachment style is you're okay with independence and you're okay with together time. Anxious style attachment is when you're very anxious and you're vigilant about somebody abandoning you. So you're always kind of on the lookout, and you may be hypervigilant to, supposed signs of abandonment. And that can also be related to inconsistency with your childhood handler or caretaker. So for example, a parent, sometimes they might come to you right away when you're crying. Other times they don't come at all. So you learn to be on guard all the time, because you don't know, are they going to come when you need them or are they not going to, because there's inconsistency there. So that's why your nervous system is trained to be hypervigilant to the behaviors of other people, because as a child you depended on it. And because, again, we're not necessarily taught how to work through the stuff, it's kind of like we go more programming, thrown into these very linear systems in society. So we're not learning how to overcome this trauma, how to relate to humans in a way that's beneficial for us and doesn't continue to feed the trauma loop. And the third attachment style is avoidant. So for avoidance, they were left alone for long periods of time to fend for themselves. So as adults, they grow up not needing anyone. Maybe they crave somebody, but they're so used to operating independently that when they are often paired with the anxious attachment, those create a form of trauma bonding. So it's a form of trauma bonding, because the anxious is going to trigger the avoidant, and the avoidant and their behavior is going to trigger the anxious. Now, if either of those partners were with somebody with a secure attachment style and the person was open to learning and not so deeply engraved in these habits and behaviors, then there might be hope for that person with the anxious or avoidant attachment style to change. So if they're not, though, it often makes your attachment style worse when you're not paired with somebody who is secure. And the other thing that was very important for me to learn is a cycle that I would get caught up in was this cycle of always looking outside of myself and like focusing too much on my partner, focusing too much on their avoidant attachment style versus my anxious attachment style. So anytime in a relationship during the healing process where we're overly focused on what somebody else is doing, we're never going to have control over that person. And it's very important for if you're watching this video for you to understand that now, but to understand that you do have control over yourself, and through changing your actions, your behaviors, the way you think, your own personal belief system, it creates an energy that is magnetic. And it naturally, when you're secure with yourself, because we're humans, we're empathic. I talk about it in human design. That's a great way to explore where you're empathic. But because we're empathic beings, we pick up on anxiety in other people. And there's no human on this planet that wants to be with somebody who has an anxious style attachment, who's going to feel like they're being controlled all the time. So from the standpoint of somebody who's in a relationship with anxious style attachment, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells. It can feel like somebody's always judging you. It can feel like you can never do anything right. And it can feel like you're responsible for that person's behavior. And that is a huge burden, and that's not fair to put on anybody. And I relate to the anxious style attachment because I was one, and I didn't understand what I was doing to my partners. I could not deal with the heavy amount of emotions in me, so I sought a partner externally because I really needed to trauma dump, which is another thing that I want to talk about, because there's trauma dump in a negative sense, and then there's trauma dumping in a sense of that's really helpful for your mind. But before I get on that topic, I just want to finish this thought real quick. So for the anxious partner, because we're not dealing with our own emotional trauma, we're seeking it externally. And then for the avoidant, how that can feel to be the partner of an avoidant is like you don't feel valued because your partner doesn't need you, and they oftentimes could go months without talking to you and they'd be fine. So it's like, how can you create a relationship with somebody who is that avoidant to the point where they won't open up at all? So they often run before opening up to somebody. So that's like an anxious style attachment person's worst nightmare. And you're not going to actually really build a long-lasting relationship if you don't take that chance to open up. So there's difficult things on both sides, but the most important thing to remember is that both the anxious and the avoidant attachment styles are coming from this space of unresolved trauma. And one of my favorite tools for healing this kind of unresolved trauma is writing and journaling and doing what I call a 4-step inventory, which is something I learned how to do when I was attending a 12-step meeting. I've been very open about this on my channel. I have struggled with alcohol abuse, and a lot of the reason why was because I had unresolved trauma. And it's so normalized in our culture. You just go away to college, and before you know it, you're drinking 5, 6, 7 nights a week. It creates a chemical addiction inside your body. A lot of us are wired to be addicts, and a lot of us don't know we were addicts. I didn't know that I was an addict or an alcoholic for a long time because everyone around me was drinking as much as I was. Binge drinking is very common, but after a certain time in my life, I kind of saw that it wasn't going on the trajectory that I wanted. I still had unprocessed trauma, and my relationships felt shallow, and I was like, something needs to change. And I never thought it would be alcohol. I legit never would have thought that that was the thing that would help change my life. But I saw other people who were sober, who had done 12-step programs, and I was like, well, what have I got to lose? I can either try to be sober, like not that hard, right? Because I'm not an alcoholic, so it should be easy for me to sustain or abstain from alcohol for a year, just as an experiment to see if my life would get better. And that experiment changed my friggin' life. And a lot of the reason was because the chemical side of things, like it was giving me mental clarity, but also the emotional side of things and the fact that it provided tools for me to dump my trauma on a paper instead of a person. So most of us are walking around with unresolved trauma, and it's in our heads, and we're holding on to it. And like I said earlier in this video, trauma is stored in the body. So even if you don't have conscious memories of that trauma, your body does. And then to make matters worse, we live in a society, as I said, was always watching horror movies, murder mysteries, crime dramas, hoary, gory, bloody movies, right? And I mean, even the movies like Saw, like I can't even watch those movies because my body will feel the pain. Like if somebody gets sliced, I literally feel like it's happening to me just by watching it. I think that's a mirror neuron effect. So when you're watching this stuff happen to people on television, in the movies, your body's reliving it. So it may not be that obvious, but it's something to consider, because if you're doing it often, it is creating chemical reactions inside your body, stress hormones, etc. Especially if you're like watching it through closed eyes and you just feel your heartbeat going faster when you're watching movies. Now, some of us are attracted to this because your body seeks homeostasis. So if you've been traumatized your whole life, you're going to be attracted to people that traumatize you. Oftentimes, this is something I had to learn too when it came to relationships, and later people who would kind of be acting as a handler in my life, aka somebody who was kind of keeping me stuck in a certain level of consciousness through means of control, manipulation, etc. And I was not a proper gatekeeper. So that's the other part of the equation. It's not just these handlers are doing something to you. You have to be a good gatekeeper. You cannot, like, I learned for me, I cannot keep blaming other people in my life. Like, I'm the common denominator. I keep attracting handler types, manipulative types, toxic types, because I'm not a good gatekeeper right now because I don't know how to be. So there's no shame in that. There's no shame in not knowing something that you don't know. So that's why we have people like this. Like, once we know, oftentimes what happens when you heal, you start to become really passionate about talking about it with other people because nobody talked to you about it, or maybe some people did and that's how you learned, but it's not, common, and you're like, dang, if I learned this stuff 10 years sooner, like, my life could be in a totally different place. That's how I felt when I quit drinking. I was like 27 and I'm like, man, I wish I had learned this at 19. I could have gone to college. I could have gone for music production. I could have gone, to do XYZ, could have saved up a crap ton of money right now instead of spending it on alcohol. So, it's never too late to start. But if you're younger watching this, then all the power to you, because you can really, train yourself to be a really powerful individual who can make an impact in this society by learning about this conditioning early and by taking action to heal yourself from it. So anyways, back to the worksheet, the inventory, and what that is. A 4-step inventory is when you take an honest inventory of yourself. So we're going to be asking ourselves, we're going to be making a list of who am I resentful at and why am I resentful. So example, I might be resentful at my roommate for being controlling and demanding and mad or something. But maybe that roommate like pays my bills or something and I'm, slacking on paying rent because they're being nice by letting me live with them, but since they're letting me live with them, they often get controlling and mean. So that's an example of a situation where I might externally be mad at them for being controlling and mean. But if I were to do an inventory and be honest with myself, I look at, where was I selfish? Well, maybe I'm a little selfish because I'm putting my own needs first and I'm not thinking about how that person might be feeling paying, double the rent because I'm not contributing. Self-seeking, where am I self-seeking in my actions? What am I doing that is putting myself first? And again, it's not wrong to put yourself first. This is just for our own awareness to recognize patterns. So maybe I'm self-seeking by not getting another job and just continuing what I'm doing and not taking action to provide more income. Maybe the third question we ask, where was I dishonest? Maybe I'm dishonest with myself internally by saying, I can't make a certain amount of income. Maybe it's my belief system. Maybe the dishonesty is I lied to my roommate and said there were no jobs available. Maybe the dishonesty is, I don't know, this is like the chance for you to dig deep within your own psyche. So sometimes it can, we have to sit with it for a minute and really dig deep. And then the last question, where was I afraid? Maybe in this situation, I was afraid that I would be homeless if I didn't live with this person. So once we look at all of that, and if you start to do this for all the people in your life and anyone who's ever made an impact on you, what you will start to see is patterns. And in that very last category, where was I afraid? You're going to start seeing a list of fears. And then you're going to start seeing the patterns of how these fears have ruled your life. So one of the tools for healing after you've done the 4-step inventory and dug deep to explore your own psyche, one of the things we would do in a 12-step program is share it with a sponsor, share it with a mentor, with someone we trust. So if you're not in a 12-step program, you don't have someone to share that with, an alternative might be an internet group. Maybe there's an online group that you can reach out to, a support group. Maybe you could attend a 12-step program for free. They have them for everything. They have them for alcohol. They have them for narcotics. They have them for codependency. They have them for partners of addicts and alcoholics. So that's called Al-Anon. Coda is the one for codependence. They have sex addicts. That one is for, the obvious. And then AA is for alcohol, NA, narcotics, and there's probably other ones too. I think they have Binge Eaters Anonymous, but they've got 12-step meetings everywhere, and they're also doing them online now. So you don't even have to show up there. And the only qualification you need to go to these groups is that you recognize you want to stop this behavior and you want to get to the bottom of your healing. So it's not about like, am I really an alcoholic or not? But more so, do I have a desire to stop drinking? Am I really codependent? I don't know. I'm here to learn and find out. So in my experience, people are pretty open and you can make some really good relationships in there. And the first thing I did was find a sponsor right away. So somebody who'd been through the steps themselves. And I asked them to be my sponsor, and then I shared my inventory with them. So maybe you're not going to do the 12-step thing. So something you might do on your own is just, maybe there's a friend in your life who might be willing to sit with you as you do, share the patterns that you've learned about yourself. And maybe that person can also help you kind of see what these patterns are. So rather than just doing this alone, sometimes we're not able to be 100% honest with ourselves. So that's the helpful thing about having a partner. So the other thing I want to share with you guys is that I do have a community tab now on my YouTube page, and I kind of see that as a hub for if people are looking to do this kind of work and for healing, to reach out to people in the comments and make friends there. I don't have time to read everybody's personal stories because I'm getting close to 100 messages a day, and I still have paying clients and I still have dogs to care for, so I just don't have time. I appreciate you guys trusting me with this. Wish I did, but it is what it is. It's what happens when you get more views on your channel, and I just can't hold that space for everybody. I can hold that space here on the video, which is what I aim to do by sharing tools in these videos. But as far as sitting down and listening to what I call a trauma dump, because we're dumping it from our mind onto a piece of paper. So there are people who are in the same process of your healing journey that might be interested in, being that mentor or that voice for each other. So the most important thing about that exercise, though, is to take all those fears and now figure out what's the positive of the fear. So if I have a fear of abandonment, how can I turn that into a prayer or a positive intention? What's the opposite of the fear of abandonment? Trust that I'm always taken care of. What's the opposite of fear that I'm going to be homeless? Trust that I'll always have what I need when I need it. There's so many other examples, but essentially, that's something we figure out when we're doing the work of journaling with ourselves, right? So anyways, that's a great tool for healing. And the thing that that can be harmful, though, I don't want to discourage anyone from talking about trauma to anybody, because everybody needs somebody to talk to. But we have to be discerning about who we're sharing it with, because for some people, not everyone's going to be ready to be able to deal with what you have to share, and they're not always going to react in the way you want. That's why you want to make sure that the person you're sharing it with is somebody who's been through the healing process themselves, someone who is able to hold space for you, someone that you trust is not a handler, not somebody here to manipulate you, not somebody who's going to hold it against you. So for most people, that's a therapist. That's a neutral third party. That is, maybe it's a good friend, maybe it's a family member, or maybe it's somebody you meet in a 12-step program who's on the same journey of self-discovery as you. So all of that to say, that is one very helpful tool. And I decided this morning, I'm going to create a pay what you can option to offer these worksheets for people. I include them in my ESP development course because it's helpful in helping us develop our intuition by letting go of these fears and these underlying beliefs that rule our life. But I want to offer these tools for everyone. So I have put a lot of time and energy into them. So I appreciate the tips so very much because they help me continue to do this work. But also, if you can't do it, maybe your energy exchange is sharing my video, liking the video, giving a comment on it, something to show an equal energy exchange that doesn't always have to be monetary. But regardless, I think these tools are important for people to have. So I am going to get ready to list them later today after I post this video on my Gumroad page, and I'll link that in the description so you can find your own worksheets there and you can start doing this journaling. But if you don't have, access to download it or whatever, this is just something you can also do on your own. Just take a notepad. Think back to your childhood. What are the most impactful experiences of my life? What resentment am I holding on to? Now, in each relationship, where was I at fault? What if they were just a projection of me? What if I'm living in a hologram and that person is literally a reflection of me? Then what would they be teaching me? What would they be teaching me as my mirror? That's another good way to look at it. But at the end of the day, the most important part of this exercise is that A, it's showing you your belief systems, and B, it's giving you back your power. Because if we're constantly the victim and we're always like trying to control someone else's behavior, there's no power in that. You will endlessly do that until the day you die. That was my experience. I did it for years. I was so helpless when it came to relationships. I was so codependent, and I just could not make people act right until I started working on myself. And then what do you know? Once I started getting peaceful inside, despite what was going on outside, all the people changed. They either left my life because they were incapable of changing and they weren't matching my growth, or I met new people that were higher vibration that reflected back to me the self-care and nurturing I was giving myself. So they reflected it back to me. My relationships got healthier. Another thing that was extremely helpful for helping me process trauma is reading. And you know why reading is so powerful instead of listening? Because when you're reading, you're using your imagination to envision what you're reading. So if you're reading fantasy, you're imagining the characters. If you're reading healing tools, you're imagining yourself healed. If you're reading about money mindset, you're reading about changing your money mind. So it aids in focus when you're reading those words yourself with your own mind. And I want to give you a list of books that really helped me. One of the first books I read when I got sober, I have talked about this before, The Secret and Asking It Is Given by Abraham Hicks. Those are both law of attraction books, very helpful. But a third one that was so helpful was Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. And I read that when I was in recovery, so I was learning about, myself. I was doing personal inventories and taking note of my behavior and what I was bringing to relationships. And I was, taking action for the first time of my life by not drinking all the time. And I was actually able to use my money on books and self-help tools. So Codependent No More really helped me understand my relationship with my parents, with my best friends, and with my partners who I absolutely was codependent with. And it shifted my relationships forever. I just needed to understand the dynamics that were at play, and that was enough for me to start acting different and start understanding the energetics of what's going on, and then it changed my relationships. Another book that was so helpful for me in my healing process, this was a more recent book that I actually came back to. I read it for the first time in 2017, 2018. It's called Journey of Souls by Michael J. Newton, I believe. And it talks basically, I think he's a hypnotherapist and he puts people under, and then he's had I don't know if it's hundreds or thousands of people he's worked with over his career, but he puts them in states of hypnosis and asks them questions about, what's the afterlife like? What are you learning in this lifetime? What does your soul do after it dies? And they, nearly all of them had the same experience. And basically what I learned from that book is that all these people who were put under hypnosis, they saw themselves in different soul groups. There were some red souls, some were yellow, some were blue. So they were kind of separated by colors, but most souls on the planet were white. So they were new souls. And then there was one encounter that shook me to my core in that book. She was a blue soul or an indigo, and he said her energy was so different than most of his clients. It was like she was very advanced, and she talked about how some of us are teachers and we come back to teach people and help people. So we live, those of us who resonate with that energy frequency live closer to source, but even those higher up level souls who come back as teachers and mentors and guides don't necessarily still know the source of all that is. We just all know that we're all part of it. So when we do make our transition into the spirit world, it's not a painful transition. It's loving, it's joyful. It's almost like that is our true reality, and Earth is just like a school or a hologram, or a great way to describe it would be like holodeck from Star Trek, where it's like a blank slate, our mind is controlling everything, and it's a computer simulation essentially. So is that where they got the idea of the Matrix from? I don't know. But so there's different soul groups. There's also a chapter in it about disembodied spirits and entities who are very lower level astral beings who literally exist because they feed off fear and thought forms. So that's why I always stress the emotional guidance scale and learning how to pay attention to your emotions and learning how to control your output and frequency. Because if you cannot get a handle of your addictions or your emotions and you're always making somebody else responsible for them, then you're going to be living in those states of fear. You're going to be a vibrational match to fear, to trauma, to entity attachments, demons, whatever you want to call it. So it's very important to learn how to sit with yourself in silence. Meditation is a great tool for this. I like to raw dog meditation, but you can also use gateway tapes if they help you focus and soften your mind. I like raw dog meditation, aka no sound or anything, because it teaches me how to sit with myself and really get a handle of like who I am without anything else. Because at the end of the day, I think makes like a more powerful person if you don't need any tools. Like you just are strong as you are, and you can do it anytime, anywhere. It doesn't matter what's going on outside of you. So that's so powerful to be able to do something like that. But that can help us stop negative momentum and help our vibration raise naturally when we meditate. And then it makes us not an attachment to these vibrational entities that feed off of fear and suffering and manifest as ghostly experiences or astral, nightmares when you have demonic attacks in your sleep. Forget what it's called, but that experience, that happened to me a lot before I was able to learn how to control my vibration and my energy field. So meditation, another great tool. Learning to manage your energy, great tool. I've also included a 21-day worksheet that tracks your daily habits. So a list of high vibe habits and low vibe habits, which I will include with the fear inventory worksheets for a pay what you can option. And those habit trackers are going to be to help you recognize, what am I doing that's supporting my healing from trauma, and what is continuing to harm me and keep me in lower states of consciousness and fear and trauma. So alcohol, substance abuse, all that stuff is going to fall into lower states of consciousness. Things like walking barefoot in nature, even not walking barefoot in nature, but being out in nature, exercise, eating healthy, high vibrational foods that are living. So adding more fruits and vegetables and living foods to your diet versus only eating processed foods or only eating dead meat is also going to help naturally. That's what I found. Again, to each their own. Some of us have different body chemistry that works with different diets. Some people feel better on carnivore. I personally feel better with higher vibrational living foods. Like they actually put plants through an aura field reader that photographs it, and they saw that those plants had a green aura, so they're living, breathing. That's why it's energizing to eat fruits and vegetables. Plus, fruits have natural water in them, and with the way the water supply is going these days, can't always trust the pharmaceuticals and the water that we're drinking, right? Like some states have really bad tap water, and it still isn't good for you even when you filter it. So getting water from fruits and vegetables as a natural source can be really helpful and keep you hydrated and keep you looking younger too, which is going to make you feel better about yourself probably, since our society's obsessed with aging. But I mean, this is just like vanity aside, but for anyone who cares about vanity, I know there's like a huge trend for like women especially, like get the Botox, get the fillers, like everybody's starting to look like everybody. I fell into that trap a handful of years ago where I was like, I need to get Botox because I'm getting old, and that's what you do when you're 30. And thank God I never got filler, because somebody close to me got it and they were in the hospital and almost died from it because they had an infection from it. injectors aren't going to tell you that. They tell you as they smile in your face while you sign the waiver, like, this is botulism. It's a neurotoxin. If I inject it in the wrong place while I'm casually talking to you during your appointment, you might die and it might paralyze your neck and it could possibly make you go blind. But sign here. You'll look really pretty after this. So that's insanity to me. I stopped with that stuff. I use frownies now, okay? Neurotoxin free. They work for me. I love them. I feel more confident. And the other thing that's actually helped me a lot, like, you know, I'm a woman, like I cared about my appearance for a really long time, especially when you're kind of groomed to be this honeypot figure. You're going to care about your appearance. And that was something that was like in my family system, very important. It was always important to look good. Everything had to look good on the outside. So my looks were very important to me. At one point, it was like long blonde hair extensions, eyelash extensions, not extensions, but like fake eyelashes, spray tan, fake nails, Botox, lots of makeup and contouring. I mean, now, like, I'll do a little bit of makeup here and there, depending on how I'm feeling that day. I dye my hair blonde because I feel more like myself. It's like brighter when I look in the mirror, so I like that. But part of the reason I chopped my hair off is to say, F you, society's standards. Like, I don't want to be this person that looks like everybody else. Nothing against it, but that's just like in my own personal healing journey of being somebody who felt like a honeypot for a lot of people. I wanted to chop my hair off. So maybe that's me healing from trauma, taking back some of my power, saying like, I'm not going to be your honeypot. I'm not going to be like this Barbie doll that's going to, you know, fit in the perfect box. I'm not going to stick your neurotoxins in my face or be brainwashing to believe that I have to get filler when I'm 27, when I'm not even old and my face is still, you know, naturally, it's still plump and luscious. And some of these things with like fillers and stuff can actually make your hyaluronic acid, I think, is in there, which we produce naturally. Like, if you get it dissolves your natural hyaluronic acid. So then you end up looking worse afterwards. So the best thing is, like, don't get started. Don't allow yourself to be brainwashed into doing these things. But like I said, like, no judgment, whatever, to each their own. I'm just telling you my own experience and my thoughts about it. So sorry if that offends anybody, but it is what it is. And the reason I don't do that stuff anymore is because I've learned that my insides are much more important than my outside, and there's a natural beauty that comes when you really work on this. And if you think about, like, reality TV is a great example of this. Just go watch like Love is Blind and some of these, you know, whatever shows with these girls that absolutely gorgeous to look at, but absolutely, no offense, bonkers crazy when they're talking. There's clearly a lot of trauma there, and in a way, it's not serving them, because the more beautiful they are, the more they're going to attract these dudes who just want them for their looks. So they're going to be feeding that trauma loop even more and being even more broken when the man ultimately doesn't dig deep behind the surface, because you're hiding behind a shell of makeup and all. And I'm talking about my former self. I used to do this too, but like, I was hiding behind a shell of makeup, hair extensions, Botox, all the things that were painting this picture of like how I wanted people to perceive me. So when I attracted all these men and they didn't dig below the surface or care what I had to say intellectually, I was like mad about it. But I'm like, well, I'm the problem. I'm like putting myself out there and all I'm caring about is looks. So why? That's also what I'm signaling for other people, to really care about my looks. So you're gonna attract the wrong people that way. So anyways, there's my rant on that, but I do feel like the beauty industry is also a place where programming takes place, and it can be harmful to young women and our self-esteem. But my point was, like, when I also watched my skin naturally reverse and my looks naturally reverse when I stopped smoking and drinking, which was very dehydrating, and a lot of meat and acidic foods and coffee also dries out your skin. So my pores were really large and I just had this permanent crinkle in my forehead. But I've been able to reverse a lot of that, which again, in turn, makes me feel better, because I feel like I look better than I did on the outside, which isn't, you know, it's not all about the looks, but to say that we're not affected by how we look is also, you know, not being honest, because people do care about how they look and how others see they look too. So it's important that we feel confident about ourselves. But my point is that the confidence comes on the inside, and you could be the most beautiful person in the world, but if your personality's ugly, then nobody's going to want to be with you, and you may end up alone, or you may end up with hundreds of partners and ultimately alone emotionally. So our society is just a little whack. We're kind of like putting a lot of our attention on the wrong places. And back to what I was saying, healing tools, journaling, meditation, natural food, natural experiences in the sunlight, track her daily habits, find support groups, which are very helpful. So whether that's an online support group or a literal physical one that you're showing up to, all these are helpful for healing. And animal therapy, I shared all about that in my last video. That was huge for me. That is huge for me. And so was finding our purpose, because what happened for me, I was spending so much of my life looking externally, trying to control people, places, and things around me to make myself feel better. I was living with unprocessed trauma. So until I educated myself on why I have a certain attachment style, why I'm programmed into thinking that I need the one. Yesterday's video was all about Disney programming and how we kind of grow up in society thinking that we need someone, and that's part of what programs us to be codependent. And there's a lot of people who are codependent but don't really know it. So having an understanding of the programming that's happening, so I can understand how it's affected me and how to break free from that. So education brings things to light, and then once they've been brought to light, then action continues on the healing journey. So we take the action. Through taking that action, we will transform slowly but surely. It really isn't an overnight process, but it is something that will improve your life every single day, to the point where you look back on your life a year from now, 6 months from now even. And even like for me, when I got sober, I was feeling better a week into sobriety, like 7 days into sobriety. They call that the pink glow. It's when you found community, when you found healing, when you found purpose, when you found mental clarity. And it's a natural happy glow that happens for a lot of people when they're getting sober. So yes, I hope this video has been helpful. I hope you've managed to find a few tools in it that you can use on your own healing journey. Stay tuned for upcoming videos. And let me know if you have ideas for any topics or anything you want to know more about. I've been talking about handlers a lot, kind of moved away from some of the gate and gateway topics. I know that I have some people on my channel because they came from those videos, so I don't want to leave anyone out. Let me know if there's anything else you want to learn about. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.